It's rare to have lived in the time of a prophet, but I see Martin Luther King as a prophet. I see him as speaking to our best notions of global citizenship, speaking truth to power with love, borrowing from all the great faiths and living his convictions. I see what he was doing in 1968 as something we should focus on more, because at times we've frozen him into the "I have a dream" speech. He was the leading spokesperson against the Vietnam War, leading a march on Washington on behalf of the poor to end poverty in the United States, and speaking out for decent wages for the workers in Memphis. Listen to the language. He's saying it's a crime in this wealthy nation for people to work for starvation wages. And if we calculate the cost of living then and now, our minimum wage now is lower than it was back then. He called poverty in this country as cruel as cannibalism. That to me is like the language of Amos that he was speaking. And he said, any faith that claims to be concerned about the souls of men and doesn't concern themselves with the economic conditions that damn them and cripple them is a dry as dust religion. He called for a revolution of values to accompany the freedom and scientific revolutions engulfing the earth, that we must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, property rights and profits are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. Bishop Desmond Tutu, Nobel laureate, said if King was alive today, he'd be railing against the banks and talking about climate change, all of which hits the poor the hardest. King was a global citizen. Just to share from what he was saying in 1967, a genuine revolution of values means in the final analysis, our loyalties must become global, and every nation must now develop an overriding loyalty to mankind as a whole in order to preserve the best in our individual societies. This call for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation is ultimately a call for an all-embracing and unconditional love for all men. This often misunderstood concept has now become an absolute necessity for the survival of man. When I speak of love, I'm speaking of that force which all the great religions have seen as the supreme, unifying force of life. Love is the key that unlocks the door that leads to the ultimate reality. This Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist belief about the ultimate reality is beautifully summed up in the first epistle of St. John. Let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God, for God is love. King called on all of us to be the change we wish to see.